Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a work session meeting of the Manitou Springs City Council for August the 12th, 2025. So I'll go ahead and do the roll call. Councilor Chandler,
Present.
Councilor Shada. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Here.
Councilor Fortune,
Present.
Councilor Weatherald,
Here.
and Councilor Wolf is not present. We do expect her, and the mayor is also present. Okay, with that, we have three items for discussion this evening. The first is Pike Ride presentation, operational report, and update for 2025. We're going to start that off with our parking director, John Crawford. Mr. Crawford?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm John Crawford, Mobility and Parking Director for the City of Manitou Springs. Did it not? Can you hear me now? Oh,
That's better.
sorry. Thank you, Mayor. I'm John Crawford, Mobility and Parking Director for the City of Manitou Springs, and I'm here to support my fellow director from Pike Ride, Tara McCarthy, that's going to give us an update on our partnership with them and the Pike Ride.
Thanks, everybody. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no,
Mayor.
go ahead. Thank you, John. Go ahead, Tara.
Thank you, everybody, for having me. I look forward to your questions. I know we had a Tara McCarthy, Executive Director, Pike Ride. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I look forward to giving you updated numbers. I know we had a healthy discussion last year, and so I'm looking forward to additional questions from our data for 2024 and also to hear your opinions on how we're doing so far for 2025. So just as a reminder, we are a nonprofit. We have 4 full-time staff at Pike Ride, plus 8 part-time individuals. We also have an agreement with Colorado College in which we have several work-study students who help us with our operations in Colorado Springs. We also have a volunteer mechanic program where members of the community assist us with safety passes, mechanical work of our bikes, and they learn about how to wrench on an e-bike, and some of them have used it as actual training to go on for jobs. We also have a very healthy board of 8, and we have a couple people swapping off in January, but we're doing pretty good. So let's look at numbers from last year. So last year we had just under 2,500 trips taken on Pike Rides. This was a 102% increase in end trips. So that means a trip could have originated in Colorado Springs, Old Colorado City, and ended here in Manitou. We also saw a 25% increase in start trips, meaning those trips did start here in Manitou Springs and ended elsewhere. We saw just underneath 6,000 miles traveled during January through December of last year. And we have seen some behavior changes. Last time we spoke, we had just about a double average miles traveled in Manitou Springs from our overall system. We've seen that average miles come down just slightly by about 1/10 of a mile. I believe that's because we have installed more stations in Manitou Springs. As a reminder, we've installed 5 additional stations last year here. And I think that has created a smaller average trip because people are able to use stations and kind of hop from station to station. I don't think that's negative in any way, shape, or form. That's actually inherent and should be when you look at bike share or micromobility, because it provides people the ability to get to where they want to go without having a long walk to a station or a long walk from a station to a business. We also saw just 1,500 pounds of CO2 reduced. And if you remember from last year, we calculate emissions reductions based on annual survey responses as to how someone would travel otherwise if they didn't use a Pike Ride. So this number includes people who would have walked, people who would have used the bus. So it's not just a general estimate, assuming that everybody would have ridden or driven a car if they didn't take a Pike Ride. So looking at whole system data from last year, we had just over 1,300 tourists use our system, and that included all 50 states plus DC and 17 foreign countries. We do know that last year we had 72 Manitou Springs residents use our system. The majority of them used our system as pay-as-you-go. We had a couple people who are monthly members, a couple people who are annual members. I don't know if you have the presentation on your screens in front of you, but the heat map that you see here is just trips that had a start or end point in Manitou Springs. So as you can see, people are very much using it here in Manitou Springs, but they are also using it through Garden of the Gods. We had one very rigorous person go all the way down to the Broadmoor, which I'm surprised they did that. But they've also gone up to Garden of the Gods and all the way east almost to Union Avenue, Union Boulevard, excuse me, in Colorado Springs. Now, when we look at the mobility, here's the actual like meat of the data. So again, average distance traveled was 3.34 miles. And that is, like I said, a slight reduction from last year, from 2023. Now, our overall system-wide average trip is 1.85 miles. So you can see that's almost double the amount of distance traveled. Again, we added 5 stations here last year, and we brought our total number of public bike racks up to 46 pieces of bike rack. Monday and Wednesday were the lowest trips of the week for the year, and Saturday was the highest trip day of the week. That probably coincides with tourist visits. I'm not 100% sure of that data here, but I would just assume that. We also parked bikes at the Emma Crawford Bike Valet, and we parked 145 bikes in a single day of bike valet. That is the largest number of bikes at a single day bike valet that Pike Ride has ever done. I will say we were slammed at certain points in times for bike valet, but we do probably expect that number to increase this year as long as we have good weather, unlike the 2023 weather that we had. All right, so looking at stations, this is data from all of 2024, so January through December. This does equal that, 2,500 rides or so. Hiawatha Gardens obviously coming in first with the most number of trips. Manitou Beckers second, and then kind of lowest Prospect and Roca. I did include the times in which we installed those just so that you could see that maybe the 32 trips from Fields Park being installed in November isn't a really good indicator of use if we don't have a full year worth of data. All right, so just as a reminder, we have a couple of different programs. We just have our standard fare programs, which is pay as you go. We have a couple of 24-hour passes. I will say we changed our 24-hour pass products this year, and we've seen a 50% increase in 24-hour pass sales so far this year. And we see that most tourists are buying those passes. And so we've done pretty well in the visitor space this year. We also have monthly, seasonal, and annual passes. We also run 2 affordability programs. One is for $20 annually. Those are for folks on federal assistance programs, and that provides them with 360 days of 90 minutes of ride time. That is quite a value for folks. Since we've started working in Manitou Springs, we've had 9 individuals apply and be on that We Ride program. We also have Pike Ride Plus, which is a private leased e-bike. It's the same e-bike that you see out in the public fleet. It just comes with additional storage and safety accessories, and that's $35 monthly. We have not opened that program to Manitou Springs residents at this time because that was a grant-funded project focused solely on Colorado Springs. I will say that we have luckily received some state funding, and we're going to be opening up that Pike Ride Plus program to Manitou Springs residents once we get a statement of work signed and that program up and running with that grant funding. So a little bit of additional leeway for folks who might be on the lower income side. So we do consider bikes to be a multifaceted solution to a lot of different community challenges. I'm just going to talk through 2 really quickly. So when we look at economic vitality, these statistics and this data is from survey respondents from Manitou Springs. This is not system-wide data. It is from Manitou Springs respondents to one of our surveys. So when we look at the Pikes Peak Marathon, whether that's the Garden of the Gods 10-miler or the Ascension Marathon, we actually provide Pike Ride bikes for their operational team. That way they don't have to drive vehicles to go about through town up into the garden to be able to set their events up or tear their events down. They're really appreciative of this. It saves them money to be able to run their event. And it also allows them to get around on weekends that are very busy for Manitou Springs without the use of a car. We know that 67% of Manitou Springs residents use Pike Ride to visit a business because of how accessible it was to a Pike Ride station. And we do cite stations near businesses, grocery stores, et cetera, to enable people to actually use them for business, groceries, errands, and what have you. We also know that 56% of Manitou Springs riders did use Pike Ride to visit a restaurant or bar. And we know that 80% of our overall visitors said that they were able to visit more places because of Pike Ride. Pike Ride really opened up the door to our region to visitors. It absolutely saves visitors money to be able to spend locally with businesses, restaurants, or other attractions, thereby increasing sales tax revenue. Now, when we look at community health, I think we all probably know that pedaling a bike is good for our physical health, even if it is an e-bike. But we do know when looking at Manitou Springs residents, 22% that use our services graduated from high school or the equivalent. We know that 44% of riders experience improved mental health. We know that 22% reported that they experience improved fitness. And we know that 67% of those Manitou Springs residents would have driven alone if they did not use Pike Ride. That is a huge, huge thing when we look at your community and whether traffic congestion is a challenge for residents to get around the community. Now, leaping into 2025, this data I just pulled from January to the end of July. I didn't want to give you a half month worth of data. But as you can see, Manitou Beckers kind of is the top hub station right now, whereas Hiawatha Gardens has fallen a little bit behind. I can't give you good reasons as to why that switched there, but we do know that the Manitou Beckers station is used quite a lot by tourists to visit Garden of the Gods. That is it's an easy access point for people to walk out of the hotels, see the Pike Ride station, and get out and go upon their way. We do know that we had 121 trips from the Manitou Springs Library. That was just installed in February. I am really, really excited about that result because that to me is residential use. That is not, I don't necessarily know if tourists are going to walk up the hill to use that for transportation purposes. I'll also say that when we look at the Fields Park trips at 171 trips, we do know that a resident in that area is using that station primarily to go to the grocery store. There's a lot of data here that probably still can be looked at, and I'd be happy to receive questions to see if we can dive into this data a little bit more. That's just a little bit of what we know about this data. Now, when we look at this time frame this year compared to this time frame last year, we are 14% increase in trips for that same time frame. I think that's actually a really, really good result because we've had bad weather this year. When we look at ride time for Manitou, it is typically around 11 a.m. till about 6 or 7 p.m. As we all know, we've had afternoon storms. I know there's been evacuations of the city buildings when the creek has risen. So I think that 14% increase in trips is actually very, very good when we look at our weather systems that we've had so far this year. I just kind of want to remind everybody, we operate very much like Mountain Metro, very much like a public transportation system where rider fares do not meet our operational expenses. That's built by design. We do not want income to be a barrier to our transportation services. Just a quick breakdown, 19% of our operating budget comes from rider fares, and that is actually a very healthy fare box recovery ratio when you look at other public transportation systems. 32% comes from municipal support, and that percentage is a combination of what we receive from Manitou Springs and the city of Colorado Springs. 16% comes from sponsorships. That can be sponsorships, whether that is Cerberus Brewing, Hillside Gardens, Schramm, the bicycle component manufacturer in Colorado Springs, or our partnership with Colorado College. 28% of our budget originates from grants. Luckily, we've done pretty well with some state agencies. I think everybody in this room knows that our state budget isn't in the best place. So fingers crossed, knock on wood, that some of our future grants over the next 2 to 3 years continue to be encumbered, and we continue to be able to expand our services. And then the last remaining 5% does come from individual donations. Let's see, that might be the last slide that I have. I left a lot of time for questions just based on last year's number of questions that I received.
Great, thank you. Council, let's open up questions. Nancy?
Yeah, a couple of questions. One, I was intrigued by the 22% are high school grads, and that
Mhm.
doesn't, is that because kids are, kids in school are riding, or is that not, what does that mean?
Yeah, so the 22%, so our services are available for 16 plus. So some of that can be high school grads, or that's individuals using our services who did not go on to higher education. So those
Okay.
could be adults as well.
Yeah. And my other question is, what's next? How can we improve ridership? What recommendations do you have for us to help
Yeah.
Pike Ride do even better in Manitou Springs?
Yeah, and it's a great question, because I think from where the system was at in 23 to where we were at last year in 24, we saw such high increase of ridership because we installed additional stations, because we made the bikes accessible to more people. We think that increasing the number of stations and increasing the number of bikes in Manitou Springs will continue that trend of, if you build it, they will come. Now, there could be a lag between when we put a station, like when we look at Prospect and Roca, there's a little bit of a lag. There's a learning curve for people to use our system. But I certainly think that expanding access will see an increase in ridership. I also think continuing to communicate about what Pike Ride services are will increase ridership. Last year, we were able to move the Shriver Park station from within the parking lot near the vehicle chargers out onto the street, and we saw an increase in ridership from that station. So I think in ways we build some stuff and then we tweak some stuff to be able to increase ridership.
Judith?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if somebody else already had their hand up though, so.
I'm
No.
sorry. Michelle, were you? No, Michelle, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
It's okay. Thank you. I just want to say I'm really happy about the number of trips from Cannon and Lovers Lane, because when those were first installed, I lived downtown and they never moved. I'm like, oh dear, because I remember the mayor was like, oh, that's not a good location and yada yada. So, yeah, thank you. Great presentation.
Okay, thank you. Judith?
Thank you, Mayor. A statement and then a question or two. First of all, I think that the Pike Ride relationship in Manitou is one of the most productive and wonderful programs that we have. And I'm just thrilled to see these numbers. When you cited that 9 individuals in Manitou used the $20 a month income dependent ridership program, I thought about those 9 people. That could be a trip to the grocery store, a trip to work. I mean, it could be a game changer. And I just had a little, pity pat in my heart about that. And that's how this community helps people not only get around and be healthy, but live their lives. So thank you for that. I don't know if this community knows how supportive Pike Ride was when we launched our e-bike voucher program here in town. And you were monumentally supportive of our efforts, even though that wasn't a Pike Ride initiative. So I thank you for that. And I think that there aren't that many people know how generous Pike Ride is, that you can, even if you don't have a Pike Ride bike that you're renting, if you have an e-bike, you can use their bike racks and lock your bike up on their bike rack if there's room available. So just really, really honored to have this relationship, working
Thank you.
relationship with you, and I love to see it grow. I have a question about your survey, how you obtain your survey results. I'm
Mhm.
assuming that when someone rents a bike, is that the point at which you collect survey data, or is it after the fact? How does the survey
Yeah.
uh,
Yep,
get?
that's a great question. So when we look at how we identify whether it's a Manitou Springs residence or not, our payment processing system gathers zip code data. So that's how we know we had 17 foreign countries use our services last year. So then we send out a survey to every single account created or continued within the Pike Ride system for 2024. And so we typically run that in January of the following year. That way we really do capture as many people as possible. And then we do ask them to self-identify their income levels, their education levels. We ask them for a zip code. That way I can really dive into the data as to where these respondents are coming from so that we can make some educated, guesses as to where do we go next. And there's a lot of really great data that we can pull from surveys.
I asked this question to segue into my next question.
Yeah.
And that is, when I talk to people that are cyclists or want to be cyclists, or they're renting a Pike Ride bike, often they cite safety.
Mhm.
And I'm just, in my perfect world, I'm just wondering if you've thought about adding a question about, do you feel safe? I want to know if, I want to know if these riders are feeling safe. And if not, I think that our next step as a town to improve ridership, whether it's Pike Ride or any other e-bike, is to really focus on safe streets and making our streets safe so that people want to come to our town because they know that they're likely to have a pleasant experience. So just a thought of if that could be a survey question, that is some data I would love to see you call, and I think that would help us tremendously as a city.
I can share some data.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
So 33% of Manitou Springs users said that they would use our services more. That is the question I asked. I didn't ask, would you ride a bike more? I did say Pike Ride specifically. So 33% responded they would use our services more if they felt safer on the roads.
Well, then
40
you answered my question right there. Okay, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yep. 44% said if cost was lower. I know earlier this year, the Parking and Mobility Board and I went back and forth on, how can we make it cheaper? How can we make it free? I think, most people do want free things, right? Like that would be great. And I know we had that conversation last year. Pike Ride, if we had funding to make it free for Manitou Springs residents, let's do it. Let's let people ride our bikes for free. I think that's just the question of where do we find funding, right, to offset the operational expense. We also had 11% respond that they would use Pike Ride more if there was a hub closer to their home or their work. And then I do want to go, maybe I'll pause there just in case there's additional questions, because I have a lot of data.
And I have one final question.
Yeah.
along with- Do you ask a question if they use the Pike Ride because of its proximity to a other transit, like a bus?
You know what? I don't ask that question, but we do try and site our stations within walking distance of a Mountain Metro stop. That way people can use our services for first or last mile connectivity. So, but I should add that question to the survey. Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your presentation.
Yes.
Thank you. John, Natalie, Julie? Okay. Yes, just a couple of observations here. Okay, if you compare the data from slide 5 and slide 10, and realizing that slide 10, the data for this year it just represents 7 months, beginning of the year till the end of last month. That's roughly 58% of the year. But if you look at those numbers, the Hiawatha Gardens, the Mantua Becker Station, Schriever Park, those are down. And they're down. I mean, for instance, if Hiawatha Gardens was keeping pace at 58% of the year, I would expect about 370 riders. We've got 194. So several of those are down, and it seems significantly to me. And those were stations that basically we had the entire year last year. Although I guess Schriever Park was moved in May of last year.
Mhm.
And then we've got some other ones where the comparisons are somewhat more difficult because things were installed in the fall.
Yep.
And so we don't have the full year, but intuitively, I would say that it seems like there's more people out riding, and I see that, and they seem to be getting around better. So in that sense, it seems like kind of a success story. But then when I see these numbers, I also am a little perplexed as to what the behavior is. There are more stations, so maybe that accounts for it. The ridership, I guess, is about online. It's actually a little ahead of 58%, closer to 60. So I don't know if you have any interpretation for that, but it seems like, and I think last year we talked about the idea of it becoming more familiar, more conspicuous, and advertising, marketing. You said you had some other answers, so maybe you could respond to some of that.
Yeah, so when we look specifically at Hiawatha Gardens, I think the location in the parking lot is not great for visibility. I think most of the parking is behind the building, which then kind of forces people to walk to the bus station. Again, no, people should be taking the bus. I think that's a good thing. But I don't think people are walking to the main street and passing by the station. It is quite hidden. We have talked about removing the bus shelter on the west side of Old Man's Trail. Correct. Yep. Thank you. And moving the Pike Ride station out to that bus shelter area because it would make it more visible. And then it also opens up a couple additional parking spaces in Hiawatha Gardens. I know Hiawatha Gardens has a broad visionary plan being looked at or, in process. So I don't know if that is the solution when we look at what the future of Hiawatha Gardens is. There might be other placement for that station where visibility is high, but doesn't necessarily go where the bus shelter is currently. We're very open to looking at, well, what is the data telling us and what is it telling us we should maybe do in that specific location? I do think that that's one of the things with Hiawatha Gardens. If we do look at Prospect and Roca, from late last year, there was only, 2 handfuls worth of trips, and now that has 43 trips. I think that's a great success story when we look at giving things a little bit of time and having people get used to and familiar with things. And Mayor, I do think adding stations, it does change behavior. So if someone might not be necessarily next to Hiawatha Gardens, they might be taking a trip from Shriver Park, right? Like we don't really know if they're turning left or right when they walk out of certain areas. And so I do believe that we are still going to see an increase in trips when we get to the end of the year. Can I promise that? I can't, but the way the numbers are going so far, I do think that we'll see an increase over 2024 numbers. And I am always happy to look at what is or what isn't working and where we can kind of move things so that it is successful.
Okay, thank you. I guess, and in looking at the slides here, I believe where you've got your comments, you have, I think, for instance, on slide 9, one of the statistics is 67% of riders would have driven alone if they didn't use Pike Ride. But I believe that's on our Manitou population, which is really only 72 people. So we're talking about 48 people. I think to say 67 is 67%. Well, the math is right, but the sampling population is not huge. Maybe that's progress, but I guess I don't get real excited about it. It may be a step forward, but again, the presentation I think is a little, it needs to be digested a bit to put things into a complete light. Other council comments? I guess not. Did you have anything else?
Nope, unless there's no other questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Crawford, did you have any?
No, sir. Thank you. And I appreciate my partnership here, and I hope we can continue it in the future and to grow it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay. Next item of business is design update for the Hiawatha Gardens Phase 1. This is the parking lot and restroom structure.
Thank you, Mayor Graham. Aaron Ringsred, Project Manager for the record. Thanks for having us here tonight. We're going to be presenting Hiawatha Gardens Phase 1 and Phase 2, requesting direction from council. While that's moving, I'll have the people up here with me introduce themselves.
Hello, everybody. I'm Byron Zick, excuse me, with Davis Partnership Architects. I'm the architect and project manager on behalf of Davis Partnership.
And I'm Beth Crable. I'm in the Landscape Architecture Studio with Davis Partnership.
Okay.
And we also have representatives from Franson Pittman, Martin & Martin, and the Artaic Group in the audience. So if there's any specific questions to them, we'll bring them up here tonight. I'm going to start off with schedule of where we're hoping to go right now. Tonight, we're obviously presenting to you, and then we would be planning on submitting our entitlement applications to the reviewers on September 4th, pending the direction we receive. And then the entitlements and the public hearings would go before each of these bodies in October. So Historic Preservation for the material change of appearance, City Planning Commission as the recommending body for the major development plan, and then City Council as the decision maker for the major development plan. Again, pending the outcome of those hearings, we would then plan to submit the plans to Pikes Peak Regional Building Department in November. We have funding sources outlined on the screen here. For Phase 1, we have Pikes Peak Regional Transit Authority, so our PPRTA 2 project. We have $500,000 from additional funding for restrooms, as well as $500,000 from Mobility and Parking Enterprise. Phase 2, we have funds from match as well as the capital improvement budget. So we are going to go through the design refinement for Phase 1 and Phase 2 and request direction regarding several strategies that we'll go through in detail this evening for each of those phases. As the design has been refined, we've really used these goals that were established through the community engagement efforts over the years to guide our decision making. So thinking about accessibility, how do we make these spaces inclusive for people of all abilities? We've looked at this as a transportation hub. So how are we encouraging multimodal transportation, utilizing this site as a hub for that? Making sure this space is secure and feels safe for all different users, thinking about sight lines, possibility for other security measures. And then we've heard throughout that design process, throughout the community engagement, that this space really needs to feel like Manitou. So how are we creating opportunities to facilitate Manitou's creativity in these spaces? The natural aesthetic, or a space that feels more soft than hard, has also been something that we've heard from the community, and we've sought to refine the design in a way that increases the amount of impervious surface on the site, as well as from previous iterations. And then dovetailing right with that is sustainability. So thinking about this site, both how it is existing today and how it will function long-term, really digging into permanent stormwater quality and how we're treating this in a more sensitive way. And then rehabilitation of the historic dance hall. How are we celebrating its history with sensitivity to that? And then designing for the future, thinking about how the city of Manitou Springs will utilize this site today, but also in generations to come, as well as thinking about the life cycle of this, this project and how we're making choices that impact life cycle costs in a sustainable way. There are a few areas in which you'll see that the design has evolved since you last saw this project in December. One is accessibility. We've been looking at how these spaces start to be created with ADA compliance refinement. So looking at those routes, taking some of those larger grading strategies and really digging into this on a feet and inches basis. Increasing again that impervious or that pervious surface, decreasing the impervious, and then really digging into the green infrastructure approach for the site and the mobility systems. In order to do this, we did collaborate with our local experts and asked them, kind of picked their brain about what they thought of the opportunities that they saw for this site. So working with Crane on a master plan for art opportunities, Parab reviewing the tree inventory report with them, and maps and talking again about these multimodal systems that intersect on our site, and then HPC making sure we're thinking about that rehabilitation approach. For each phase of the design, we'll go over the following strategies. We'll start with sustainable stormwater management, then go to parking lot, which is only for phase 1. Strategy 3 is how we're thinking about mobility, and strategy 4 is arts and community. Again, giving that opportunity for creativity of our community, and then summarizing it with our cost estimates and funding sources. So diving into phase 1, the area that's identified as phase 1 on your screen includes the restroom structure north of the pavilion here, and primarily most of the parking is to the east side. So we'll go through each of these strategies individually. I did want to double check with council on if there is a preference for going through all these strategies at once and the discussion at the end, or pausing at the end of each strategy for discussion and direction.
Does council have a preference? I think if we just go through the whole thing, we can come back to whatever our questions are. We'll take notes.
Okay,
Thank you.
sounds good. So strategy 1 is our sustainable stormwater plan. So currently on the site is primarily impervious surface, with the water running to 2 drains on the east side of the pavilion. The proposed approach takes that existing drainage pattern and implements green infrastructure, using that so that all of the water that's falling on the site is running through a water quality element before exiting our site. In order to meet this goal, we did reduce the impervious surface on the site by 23%. And working with those existing drainage patterns, not only does that help us for floodplain compliance, but it also is a good cost benefit because we're reducing our cut and fill as much as possible. We worked with our public services department and identified the need for snow removal strategies within the parking lot and snow storage, specifically when we get our larger snow events, and identified areas within the site for that snow to be stockpiled, and that as it melts, it is again going through our green infrastructure. For the sustainable stormwater approach, we also collaborated with our MS4 permit reviewers to make sure we're showing options and opportunities in compliance with our requirements there, as well as working with our floodplain administrator. The rendering that you see on your screen shows the opportunity on the southern portion of the site, east of the pavilion. You can see there's kind of a blue triangle in the bottom left of the screen orienting the viewer. It takes the pavement and pulls that back from the top of Bank along Fountain Creek and utilizes that space for green infrastructure, specifically a rain garden. The plan on the screen shows the overall strategy for how water is flowing within the space. The blue arrows represent the rain or the water direction as it flows again towards that east side of the site. Or east side of the pavilion. The yellow areas are flow through planters. So as the rain falls, it'll move through these planters, making use of the native species and pollinators, and then enters the rain garden as its final destination before leaving our site. The line outlined in red is our floodplain, and this really did define how we needed to approach where some level of detention could occur. So that's where the rain garden is necessitated to be on the east side of the pavilion outside of the floodplain. Strategy 2 is parking. So we did refine the alignment of the parking approach since December. One of those big drivers was reducing the impact to existing trees. We had some additional survey work done, and as we were looking at the proposed edge of pavement and the existing edge of pavement, we wanted to find every opportunity to bring that edge of pavement further away from the trees. Some of the existing pavement is within a foot or less of some existing trees on the site. The previous design also showed parking areas that would have encroached upon the slope on the east side of the site, which would have necessitated the need for a retaining wall on the east. So we also wanted to pull back for that reason. We did incorporate city landscape standards for our parking lots and parking lot standards for parking dimensions, travel lanes, etc. And as an overall goal, looking for the best ratio of impervious surface to parking spaces. So how can we maximize our parking while minimizing our paving so that we can really meet that stormwater goal as well as sustainability for the site. So the view on the screen here shows the entrance to the west of the restroom. Again, the blue triangle on the top of the screen here. Oh, sorry. Shows where you're standing as the viewer, with the restroom on the left-hand side of the screen and looking east into the proposed parking area. So the plan here shows the proposed parking lot alignment. It has implemented more landscape islands. We do have a total parking count of 96 spaces, with 6 of those being ADA accessible spaces. We've located the ADA accessible spaces near destination. So we have several of them here on the east side of the restroom, where they have a accessible ramp up to the restroom space. We have one on the west here adjacent to that plaza space. And then we also, of this bay of EV chargers, have identified one of those spaces to be an ADA compliant space as well. Previously, there are 140 spaces on the site, 11 of those being ADA. The existing area of square footage is over 46,000 of impervious surface, and proposed would reduce that amount to about a little over 35,000. So strategy number 3 is thinking about mobility. So we've heard from the community that bike lockers are a big goal for this site, and an amenity that we don't have currently on the site, and that we would want these types of amenities to be scalable as demand grows. We also know that we want these at decision points, so and destination. So we have located them here adjacent to the restroom, where you're kind of coming and going or exiting that parking area. And that as we're selecting fixtures, that they should be selected to accommodate non-standard bikes, again, designing for all abilities. And then when we have talked about mobility, we also think about, pedestrian mobility, and how are we minimizing the need for stairs and even minimizing the need for ramps to have a sloped walk that's more comfortable and doesn't have that difference of experience. So on the screen here, we don't always notice the grade change on a site until you're trying to navigate it using a mobility assistance device. The El Paso Boulevard elevation is over 5.5 feet higher than the pavilion. So that was the total grade change that we needed to navigate in this space in a way that would feel comfortable for those of all abilities. The tightest grade change happens between the restroom and El Paso Boulevard, where we go from 5.6 to 2.7. So this is the one spot in the design where we are proposing a more formal ramp with an associated staircase. Currently, we only have staircases that allow someone walking along El Paso Boulevard to navigate grade into Hiawatha Gardens. Right now, if there was someone that couldn't use the stairs, they're having to walk around to one of our vehicular entrances to enter the site. So knowing that this restroom will be somewhat of a destination, we wanted to provide that access point there. The EV chargers will remain in place on the west side here, and that this is becoming paved, and again, providing a walkable path to get them out of the vehicular pathway and to the destination of the restroom. You can see the ADA parking spots are called out here in greater detail, a carryover here from our parking lot strategy discussion. And then where you see this parking symbol with the bike symbol is where we have our bike parking opportunities, both in lockers and bike racks, as well as a small service station. And then the blue lines are representing the ADA routes. So again, all of these are sloped routes with the exception of the connection between the restroom to El Paso Boulevard. Strategy number 4, arts and community. So we worked with Crane to identify a master plan for art opportunities within phase 1 and 2 of Hiawatha Gardens. And this is a desire for us to be designing for the future, knowing that we wouldn't be able to fund all of the art right now that we want to have in this space. How can we make decisions both in location and materials that provide opportunities for those in the future with minimal preparation required for art installation. So one thing we heard was murals. So picking a material that can receive that mural in the future or receive a mosaic. We also see, the creativity component of Manitou Springs comes from our community members. So providing spaces for gathering for residents and guests as they move through this space and trying to design ways for that to feel intimate, a place to slow down. And then we are a pollinator city, so making sure the pollinator plant species are woven into our entire plant palette throughout the site so that we're creating a pollinator hub as well as a mobility hub on the site. The plan on the screen here shows where we've identified those opportunities in phase 1. We see opportunity for murals on the restroom structure. We see opportunity for murals on the bike lockers as well. All of our seat walls, specifically these around the gathering area, we see as opportunities for mosaics or other types of installation art that can be installed on that concrete surface. And then the blue area here is identified as one of our gathering spaces, but we also provided seating around the restroom structure so that as you might maybe need to wait for someone using the structure, you have a place to sit. The other benefit of some of these spaces is we have utilized cast and place poured concrete seat walls so that as we're needing to retain grade and navigate grade change, that they're serving a dual purpose of also providing seating to people visiting the site. And then the restroom on the screen is shown, and this does have a slightly modified programming from a budget standpoint for what you saw in December. So we have 3 fixtures for women, 3 fixtures for men, and then 2 family or gender neutral restrooms, as well as a custodial closet. And again, we're showing the opportunity for a mural on the south side, but obviously that's not a proposed mural. It would need to have our Manitou flare added. And then project funding versus cost estimate. Oh, actually, there is one risk I wanted to make us aware of is that we did have some additional survey work done, and it does show a sewer cutting through the northern portion of our site. Based on our preliminary review, we think it's maybe not quite on that exact alignment. So we're doing camera investigation to confirm that it is there. And it would run pretty close to where our restroom structure is shown. So that's something that we're working through with more information. And then project funding versus our cost estimate. So we reviewed the project funding at the beginning of the presentation in terms of where those funded sources are coming from. And then our cost estimate is right now is about $3.385 million, which makes us about $650,000 over budget. So we wanted to share this tonight in full transparency. We're still working on, looking for opportunities to save money. We're also, identifying any grants that we can go after. And just thinking creatively about how can we address costs? Is there an opportunity, for example, to reutilize the asphalt that we're demoing by having that go to Public Works to be used for millings in the future? Those sorts of things that can save the project money, but also can help us elsewhere in the city. So we're just wanted to be fully transparent, happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Questions, council? Judith?
Thank you, Mayor. Most of my questions are regarding phase two, but, and tree removal, but, with regards to phase one, budget notwithstanding, let's say we are ready to put a shovel in the ground. When are you anticipating that groundbreaking would occur? Phase one only.
Yes. So assuming smooth sailing on all of our permit reviews, et cetera, we're looking at February of 2026 as when we would mobilize. Part of what's driving that schedule is really the asphalt and the landscaping. So there are certain improvements that are temperature sensitive. So we want to schedule that, knowing our construction duration, to get it all done so we have enough of those warmer months to finish it. Which we would be shooting to finish it by July.
And on slide number 22 of 24, the phase one project funding, you mentioned a sewer line. Is that cost budgeted for in this, or would that be an additional cost in addition to the $650,000 overrun we're looking at right now?
We have some allowances for utilities. It really depends on exactly where it is, because that would be something that if we did find out that it's where the survey is currently showing, we'd want to have that discussion.
I have now a tree question. I'm looking at the tree inventory in the packet, and it's on page 9. And there are 1, 2, 3, at least 4 trees that you have looking at transplanting. Are these in phase one around the bathrooms?
Yes, there are 2. So he identified 4 trees that could be transplanted due to their size and condition. There's only 2 that we would be proposing to transplant, and those are the 2, I believe trees 3 and 4 are the ones that we would look at possibly transplanting, and that is because of the ramp and stair alignment there.
And would those be transplanted somewhere else in this project, or
Yes.
you would, okay, because you know, when you transplant a tree, that really puts the tree at risk. I understand that for this phase of the project, but you've indicated 4 trees, so I was having trouble figuring out where the other 2 trees were as I walked the site today.
Yes, and those, he identified them again as a possibility for transplant, but we don't see a need to transplant them at this time. And those would be, I believe it's 5 and 6 there. All planting on the north side, other than what has to be disturbed for the stairs and ramp, we do intend to maintain in place and protect during construction. So we wouldn't anticipate disturbing trees 6 and I believe it's 5 and 6, yeah.
And lastly, this was quite a few months ago, but I attended the community engagement process for the hub. And I know there was at least one other council member in attendance with me, and maybe more, but there was very serious and significant interest in really showcasing the Indigenous population and our Indigenous history in this hub. And it was pretty overwhelming, whether it was art or wayfinding or history signs. And I didn't see any of that in either the phase 1 or phase 2 schematics. And I was wanting to encourage not only council, but you to go back and take a look at that input. And we have a very robust Indigenous community here and in the surrounding area, and to seek their information and input on this project, because that was a significant ask of in that group. I believe that's all I have. Thank you. I mean, this is a great improvement over what you've got over there right now. I mean, we're talking about, we have petroleum based horrible stuff right on the Fountain Creek. I can't even imagine how much of that is already in Fountain Creek. So I'm really hoping that phase 1 is something that we can look at funding. Of course, we're looking at, an election here and a ballot issue that if it's approved will be on the ballot. So of course, we're all a little wary of funding at this point, but I'm really pleased with the overall presentation on phase one. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback.
Julie?
What, if any, accommodation do we have in the parking lot for oversized vehicles such as RVs?
That right now we are not anticipating oversized vehicles in this lot. We are directing oversized vehicles to make use of, and maybe John might be the better person to answer. But right now we're seeing this for the Dillon, and I think there was one other location, but not having it here at Hiawatha.
Okay. And also, under the funding screen, where did there was $500,000 and it said additional funding, the middle one there for 500,000. Where's that? Is that coming from I don't know where that's anticipated, or is that what you're looking at trying to get?
That's the
Denise.
COG. The COG gave us that 500,000.
Oh, so we already have that?
Yes.
And PPRT has already agreed to provide the 1,000,007 that's up there? Okay.
Yeah, Denise, you might want to refresh my memory here. That's PPRTA 2, which we're now into PPRTA 3. So that's kind of what's still sitting in an old piggy bank. They'd like to see us do something to use the money. We're okay to use it, but
And Mayor, it can only be used
soon.
for this project. I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is the PPRTA and it can only be used for the Hiawatha project.
Right. Good. Thank you. I think that's sufficient.
And then I also wondered, with respect to the $500,000 that will be coming out of the parking and mobility enterprise, and I don't know that you would necessarily know this answer, but I don't know what is the balance of that enterprise fund as of the end of 2024 and as of the end of June of this year?
So that's in the SIP that you guys have already approved for this budget season. And the balance I don't have exactly. We're waiting next week. We'll be bringing you the Dillon loan for us for first reading to approve that loan. And then that will help with the balance. But in 2024, I don't have the exact balance. I can try to find that real quick, but I don't have it on the top of my head. But you approved the 500,000 in the 2025 budget SIP.
Okay, so we've already set aside the 500,000 from the enterprise fund, and do you have information on what the balance of that fund is as of June?
I don't have it right on the top of my head, no. And it will change when we get the budget. I mean, when we get the loan, right? Because we've been spending all the money for the loan. So we'll have to add that back and then that will give you a better balance.
So, we've been approved for the loan?
Yeah, we just got that today and we got where the interest rates are and that we're bringing you first reading next week.
Okay. I don't know the word scalable that was on one of your screens. What does that mean?
In the context of the bike rack is that we have, maybe we'll say 4 bike racks now, but designing different spaces to have more bike racks in the future if need demands. That, we're just seeing those bike racks full all the time. We need to add a few more. We've identified a few spaces where that can be added.
I see. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you. Thank you.
I guess, Council, what I might propose is when we looked at this last time in December, we were basically trying to decide whether we wanted an open air pavilion or an enclosed pavilion. Those were at that time options 1 and 2. And now we've broken the work into 2 different parts here. So maybe it would make sense to go through and hear about the phase 2. And then I know I've got some questions that relate to both, so I'll withhold questions till we get that. But if that's agreeable to council, I would suggest that's what we do. If you do have questions specific to phase 1 that you'd like to ask now, this is still a good time. Judith?
I do have one question and I almost kind of know the answer, but if we're looking at currently a $650,000 budget shortfall for the proposed plan as presented tonight, Has there been discussion about a phased approach? In other words, since the COG has put in $500,000 for the bathrooms, that we proceed with construction of the bathrooms and then, we get something done, or is that really not feasible with this scope of project?
Thank you for that question. Right now, to give you kind of some context on our timeline of how we got to this point is, so we have, when we receive the design, there's about a 3 to 4 week cost estimating period. So we received the design at the beginning of July. At the last week of July, we had a cost modeling workshop where we went through the cost estimate, identified that we were over budget, and have been working since that point to reduce the budget. We've reduced it to this point, and the next steps that one of the next steps that we were identified as maybe needing to be explored is that phased approach that you're talking about. So it's been discussed, but not refined to the point where I could give you a definitive, here's how we've figured out the best way to do that in a cost-effective way and a way in which those transitional areas are going to make sense. So that would take.
But I hear you
additional-
saying it's on the table if it needs to be.
If that's something council wants us to explore, that's definitely something we can explore. We haven't chased that too far down the road yet.
Okay, thank you.
Nancy?
Yeah, if we're talking about a phased approach, I mean, it's already a phased approach, but I would just take the 800K from the phase 2 SIP and use it to finish phase 1 as quickly as possible. Because we need that. We don't need the phase 2.
Thank you. Other comments from council on phase 1? Okay, if council has no objections, let's go on with the presentation for phase 2, and then we can have a more extensive Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Graham. And I will, at the conclusion of phase 2, be requesting direction from each of those strategy items before we close both items, if that's okay.
I understand. Yeah, no, we want to get this project. We need to do something.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
So tonight I'm presenting phase 2, the pavilion and plaza. It's the area outlined here on the screen, including the pavilion and the plaza to the west. The reason that we're presenting this tonight is when we talk about our entitlements like the major development plan and MS4 permit, it's important that we're including all of this master plan vision for the site as we work to meet our standards as well as our MS4 requirements. We're speaking to the MS4 specifically, phasing it does not negate the need for it because of the amount of disturbance that we have here. And so it's important that we have a full approach that shows that we're in compliance with that MS4 permit. And that's why they're being presented together.
Can you tell us, what does MS4 mean?
I'll share it in my layman's terms, but if there's additional detail requested, I'll be deferring to some experts here in the audience. But it's basically our stormwater obligation. So as a member of these watersheds, making sure we're approaching our site in a way that complies with standards for how water's exiting the site and how quickly. So there are 3 strategies that we're going to go through for phase 2 here. The first, like before, being our sustainable stormwater management plan, second being mobility, and third being arts and community. Strategy 1, this portion of the project is in the floodplain. So we're really looking at increasing our pervious surfaces to allow for more infiltration in these spaces, as well as improving water quality by making use of our native species and pollinators. Again, we're working with existing drainage patterns, and this is again from a cost perspective, but this area of the site is where there's a lot more sensitivity with that floodplain and floodway, specifically on the southernmost portion. And so we've been working in close collaboration with the MS4 permit reviewers as well as our floodplain administrator, and working to have this design to be as close to neutral for cut and fill within the space as we navigate these grade changes. So this is the view on the south side of the property and what we're envisioning here. A couple things I want to note in this view is that this wall here is what we're proposing to remain the historic wall that's there. So we're working within the existing wall alignment and then navigating that grade. Similar to phase one, we've tried to eliminate the need for formal ramps. So we do have a sloping structure down here to get people of all abilities to interact with the creek. But we've also provided a small set of stairs on that side as well. One of the things that had been heard earlier in the project was the community's desire to connect with the creek or have opportunities to connect with the creek. So that is where this programming opportunity comes in, is really wanting to honor that request with engagement and celebration of the creek here. The existing impervious surface on the site is over 9,000 square feet for this portion. We're talking about the portion that we have sort of had flexibility in with this portion of the design. And so by proposing these planting areas and these lawn spaces, we've increased the pervious surface on that portion of the site by 73%. So that was one aspect of our sustainability stormwater strategy here, was just decreasing how much runoff's occurring because we provided more opportunity for infiltration. Strategy two is mobility and circulation on the site. So again, how can we plan for these bike amenities, both as it's going to be today and as we see the potential for needs to grow? And then placing them at decision points or where they have visibility, and again, accommodating non-standard bikes. We also had a grade change to navigate here from the existing elevation of Old Man's Trail down to the pavilion, and making sure we were really dialing in that to eliminate the need for stairs and handrails, because handrails do come at a cost, as well as what I've heard, from people who are more sensitive to grade changes, that is a lot more comfortable for them if it's more of a slope and less of a formal ramp. So the areas here with the solid blue line are where we see our accessible paths, or more primary paths that have been designed to be ADA compliant. We also have this dashed line here. This is another response to the community engagement we had around the plaza, which is wanting to really celebrate some of those spaces and not have trees and islands and be able to sort of meander through the plantings. So this is more of a tertiary level path, that it's not really about getting from point A to point B when you're walking along that path, but really just enjoying the space. And as a result of that, you'll see that art opportunities have been cited along that path as well. We have about 2 feet of grade change here between Old Man's Trail and the pavilion structure here. So where we're having that grade be made up for is along this path here. And then we have this as a flatter area within the lawn space. And then utilizing our seat walls, again, to help navigate that grade. So they're serving dual purpose there. And then bike parking we have here along Old Man's Trail for that end of that phase, but also it will have visibility from Memorial Park. So people who are making use of Memorial Park would have access to that parking infrastructure. So art and community was another goal, and we're using similar strategies here to what we talked about before. What has been added here is art as a play opportunity. So in different situations, we might typically see the use of a specific play structure, but here we've identified an opportunity to collaborate with a local artist to have something that's more of an interactive piece that can be sort of that playful element in the plaza. And then again, weaving these pollinator species and our native species into our plant palette. So this is the view from the north side of phase 2, looking south. So we have that flexible play experience here, or flexible sort of gathering experience on the lawn, with the opportunity for, these are obviously placeholder structures, the opportunity for artistic flair and imagination happening there. And then having some of these seating nodes both in the lawn area as well as tucked into our planting areas to provide variable gathering opportunities here. It's important to note part of the location of the lawn is also in an effort to meet some of our hazard mitigation strategies. So we have the sidewalk along this edge of the pavilion and then have the trees set back. So we're having proper sort of defensible space. And then this is a view from the south side of the lawn looking north. And so the plaza space has kind of transformed from being, I'll say, a plaza to a garden plaza with the incorporation of these planting areas. And then we've identified the opportunity for art in sculpture, murals, and mosaic or some sort of installation on those seat walls. So we have the interactive art piece on the north side of the plaza so that it can be accessed from the hardscape as well as the lawn. We have the seat walls here identified as those mosaic opportunities. Small little nook gathering spaces along that Discovery Trail, just immersed in the planting, and then sites for additional sculptures within that planting area and murals on the bike lockers. When we're thinking about siting those sculptures, we are not installing foundations as part of this phase. That's not what we're assuming, but really thinking about placement of those sculptures with our proposed tree alignment. So we're thinking about how those, how it's viewed from different spaces once the piece is identified there. And then gathering spaces. So we have the flexible lawn, the smaller nodes adjacent to the lawn space that you can sort of observe the larger space, but have that seclusion on the edge, the Discovery Trail nodes, and then the seating through seat walls along the creek. And those are the strategies for phase 2. So I know you mentioned you have a few more questions about phase 2.
Yes, I think probably other council members do as well. No, thank you for that that briefing. I think that gives us a more inclusive picture. Council, before we continue on, so we have we need to provide direction, really, I guess 7 flavors of direction tonight to staff. We have 4 items for phase 1, which would be the sustainable stormwater, the parking lot, mobility, and arts and community. Did I get that right, Erin? Does that sound right?
Yes, and I think the restroom, I didn't put that as a strategy, but since we have changed that programming from December from 5 gendered facilities to 3, that would also be something I'd look for direction on to make sure we're headed in the right direction
Okay.
with that.
Right, great, thanks. And on phase 2, we would again want sustainable stormwater, mobility, and then arts and communities. Those are the criteria. Okay, so council, I think, I guess my thought is when we looked at this previously, we looked at it on October the 15th and then December the 3rd, we were trying to figure out whether we wanted an open air pavilion or an enclosed pavilion. That was a lot of our thinking. And if I remember correctly, in December, we realized that we didn't have enough money figured out to do what the cost estimates were then. And I think we talked about mothballing the pavilion with the idea that we could get this other stuff done and then we'd have to raise the money to do the pavilion. I guess with that in mind, it seems like previously we looked at numbers that included both what are now phase 1 and phase 2. And I've looked at the numbers. I think Councilor Chandler, as you mentioned, we have a $650,000 shortfall just for phase 1. Of course, we do have some money stored up for phase 2. So I think maybe we want to have a more general discussion and think about, do we need to take money from 2 and put it against 1? So that would be one, I think, discussion topic. October 15th, the price tag we were looking at was $4,951,000. And that was an estimate based on what we knew at the time. And that was for the open air pavilion. By December the 3rd last year, it was almost 5.7 million, 5,685,884. So we've seen the cost go up, which that was something I noticed that concerns me. But at the same time, the city and various people in the city have been dealing with this Hiawatha Gardens, concept for at least 7 years. So council, I guess if we could have kind of a general discussion, then as we sort of get some resolution, I guess we drill down to those specific things that Aaron's asking for tonight. If somebody's got a better idea, I'd be happy to hear it. If not, well, let's go ahead and just open this up to a general discussion to include both phases 1 and 2. Thank you. Who'd like to start? Or do we, okay, Judith?
Thank you, Mayor. So I would be in favor of Counselor Fortune's recommendation that we look at utilizing the SIP funds previously allocated for phase 2 and move the $650,000 out of that into the phase 1 project so that it can be shovel ready for 2026, early 2026. I don't believe that, even though, as you said, and you indicated this on a slide, that these phases have gone through a design evolution. I believe that's more on phase 2 than phase 1. So in my personal opinion, I think we have had adequate community engagement on that phase of the project. We certainly need those amenities and increased mobility, bathrooms, and I'm assuming that's going to include the bicycle infrastructure as well. That would be my proposal. And then move on to a discussion on what we're going to do about phase 2 and just kind of get phase 1 wrapped up here first. Would be
Okay,
my-
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I also like that approach, but let's hear from other councilors. Julie?
I like that approach too. I just have a question. I don't know if there's really an answer to it, but given that we're hoping to find grant monies to help with the shortfall, are we more likely to be offered a grant for phase 1 versus phase 2, or in terms of the priorities of the grantors? Or is it all just kind of the same mixed bag? Does that question make sense?
Thank you, Counselor. It does make sense. I don't know that I have the information to speculate on it. I will say that we do have a meeting set up with History Colorado on Thursday to discuss, grant funding opportunities with them when we talk about the pavilion phase. But that's kind of the information I have to offer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we do look at mobility, but we've woven mobility throughout these phase 1 and 2. So I think depending on the grant, the argument can be made. But again, would be at the direction of council.
Well, thank you. So that would be my only concern. I hate to take money from the SIP phase 2 and use it for SIP phase 1 if it turns out that we really would have had a better chance of getting some free money for phase 1 than for phase 2. But all of that's rather speculative, and I appreciate the sensitivity of having to get started so that we don't lose the PPRTA money. So do you know what I'm saying, Mayor?
Yes, I do. And I'm sympathetic to that. I think Denise has quite a bit of background here. She can maybe provide a little guidance.
Yeah, we can still apply for grants, and then if we get it, we just don't use that funding. So we've done that for other projects. So we'll still be applying for a grant. There's one that we might be able to apply for next year. We can't do this year because we're using it for the creek walk. So we'll continue to look for that. And then if you get that grant, then you just take that money that you had for it and you move it into the phase 2.
So it doesn't disable us from asking for phase 1 grants if they understand that we could just steal it from phase 2. That's not a big deal.
No, you can say we'll be using it for something else, or you'll say we have this. What it does say is that we have the funding. We've committed a good portion of it, and we're just needing some help to get us over the
Okay, thank you.
edge.
That would be my only concern. So I'd certainly be in favor of moving the funds from phase 2 to phase 1 so that we can get rolling here.
Okay, thank you. So we've, go ahead, Judith, please.
I really appreciate that. And I'm always, very sensitive about grant money. I guess right now I'm feeling really uncertain about the global economy and the US economy right now, with the question of, do we have tariffs? Do we not have tariffs? And how is that going to impact these capital projects we have going forward? And I think I would sleep better at night if we had some understanding, because this Hiawatha Gardens has been going on for a very long time, and I would love to see the community see that we are moving forward with our micromobility promises that we have made. So who knows what this project would cost if we don't move forward now, and get a shovel in the ground for 2026. And who knows, the prices may go up anyway, but I think if we move quickly, and there isn't significant tree removal or disturbance or ecological upset on phase one. I do have those concerns on phase two. So I really feel confident that we're moving in the right direction with phase one at this time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so four of us have voiced support to move the phase two money into the phase one portion of the work. We haven't heard from several people. Natalie, please.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I'm comfortable moving that money as well from phase two to phase one. And then I just also wanted to give a shout out. I really appreciated the way that you incorporated our advisory boards and Crane in this conversation. I know they take it really seriously and they really appreciate it when we do reach out to them. And so I just want to thank you for that. And also I do believe it results in a more robust, community-driven result, which I also think is obviously a good thing. So
Thank you. Yeah, we agree. So.
Great. Thank you, Natalie. Michelle, your thoughts?
I'm good with moving money from phase two to phase one.
Thank you. John? Okay, we're good. So council's on board with taking the available funds from phase one, a little over $1 million, and putting that towards phase one. Okay, so now really council, we can have kind of a general discussion and we could start going to the specific strategy items. So if there's any comments here, just kind of a general nature, let's do that first. Does anybody have anything? Yeah, I'm sorry, phase one, rather general comments. Denise, did you have something?
Mayor, so what I'd like to do is next week, I'll bring that to a formal vote so we have it on record. And instead of just a direction here, we'll bring for a formal vote to move 750,000 over to this project from the SIP so that we have that.
Okay, if you could add,
I'm sorry, you said 750. I thought it was 650.
650, you gave 750 to the project to begin with. So if you only want 650 to go over, we'll put that to the formal vote then.
okay, could you put that on the agenda for next week? Okay. All righty. So comments of a general nature here. Does anybody have anything they want to, before we get into the strategies? Okay, we could.
Just to reiterate again, the indigenous people representation in this, I think would be really important for our community.
I have a follow-up question on that. I think similar to the art, if we identified opportunities for that, although maybe it can't be implemented initially, would that satisfy the concerns that it's planned for in the future for an opportunity? Or is it something we're looking for, like designed and detailed as part of?
I think, from my takeaway from the community engagement was certainly indigenous representation in the art, but also of a historical nature of giving some background information on indigenous history. Kind of like if I was going to use Adams Crossing as an example, that little walkway over by Sheldon's Auto where they have those placards and photos of what, those kinds of things. But I would defer, and perhaps Mayor Graham, you would know the contacts of the indigenous peoples. I know Maddie Paluto, who's a resident here, would be a source to reach out to them, because I certainly would want their input much more over mine. But so that's something of that nature. And there's been some rumbles about the Hiawatha name and it being appropriated from the indigenous peoples, and I think that kind of started a conversation, and just want to make sure that we're very culturally sensitive in all of our developments, but certainly specifically this one.
Good, thank you. Council, I'm looking, it's almost 7:30. We usually take a little break at 7:30. Shall we do that and then come back and work on the strategies? Let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back and we'll go through the strategies. Can we take our seats and we'll get started, please? Okay, thank you all. So it looks like by moving available funds from phase 2 to phase 1, we can get phase 1 done. That said, we still have some questions to answer about the 3 strategies. So if it's okay with council, I think maybe we'll just take the strategies one by one. And then I think once we after we've discussed them all, maybe we'll go back and make sure they still line up with what we want to do. Because sometimes you make your first decision, then you realize some subsequent decision is going to impact that. So first item would be the sustainable stormwater phase 1. So this is the parking lot and the restroom complex. Aaron, could you bring up an appropriate slide so we have that to look at?
Elena, would you go to slide 13 on that phase 1 presentation?
Okay, great. Phase 1, slide 13. And I guess, Aaron, can you, I mean, as it's presented here, we've got the flow-through planters, we've got the rain garden. Is this an either-or kind of question, or what specifically would you like to get from us?
It is not an either or. This is the system that we're proposing in terms of ratio to pervious to impervious structure. These are the strategies that we're using for green infrastructure. Using this as green infrastructure as opposed to something that's a little bit more hard-sided engineering, making sure we're headed in the right direction with this approach.
Okay, so I guess council could, I mean, if it was council's inclination to look at this and say, we're happy with it, we think this is good, that would be sufficient direction for you?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, I just want to understand. So, okay, council, let's discuss this. Anybody have opinion on it? I mean, this looks good to me. I'm taking this from a layman's position and looking for your professional opinion here. I've seen a lot of floods in Manitou, but that I don't know if that qualifies me for being an expert on flow through planters. It seems like a good idea. Judith, do you have some experience with this? And Nancy, I mean, and Julie, we've got several proficient gardeners here, so.
Well, I mean, if we were really doing, and if we were going to take this lot and we were going to say stormwater and runoff and Fountain Creek is our #1 priority, we all know, because we've had this discussion before, we wouldn't even be orienting the parking this way. You don't orient the parking spaces from the floodplain down, but we already had that discussion, and we weren't changing the parking configuration because I was told that we'd lose parking spaces, and it was the parking spaces won out over the flood control in that area. So, I mean, I lost that battle. So we have to deal with reality of what we have left. So I mean, if I was designing this parking lot for specifically stormwater, I'd say you have to reorient the parking spaces. But since since that died on the vine, this is a drastic improvement. It looks like when you say flow through planters, are you talking bioswales particularly? I mean, are you getting professional input from gardeners, planters, permaculture people on what to plant here? Because I guess that's my thing, is bringing in our community of gardeners and planters and specialists to help design these things for their intended purpose. So is that happening?
Thank you for that question. So part of our team is Martin & Martin Engineering, who is our engineering team who utilizes a lot of green infrastructure. and sees sort of how those age over time, what works, what doesn't. So they're part of that team. We're also working with our Parks Department to make sure we're taking lessons learned from other instances of green infrastructure in town, utilizing as we move into the next step of design development, utilizing those species here, as well as referencing some of those planting guides from the butterfly pavilion that have been utilized for pollinator species. So really taking that institutional knowledge, both from our consultant team as well as local experiences, to put the best palette forward. The rain gardens are, sorry, the flow through planters are showing something that would be more of like gallon-sized plants at installation. The rain garden, we are proposing native seed is used to get that established, to help with that maintenance over time.
So are those planters raised planters? Are they?
Sorry if I misspoke. The flow through planters have basically curb cuts within them so that the water is flowing into the grain garden. Some of it might flow into the flow through planters. Some of it will infiltrate there, and what doesn't infiltrate in those peak storm events will go to the rain garden and be
So
gathered.
pretty similar to what was planned for Shriver, the center of Shriver, where that little,
Correct.
because that could be kind of be considered a bioswale too, a little, okay. Yeah. But she's talking about I'm talking about these, are they? Okay. So that makes sense. And then for the rain garden, so are you taking out you're taking out all that concrete and literally planting a native bed of native species?
That's correct, with a slight
Okay.
depression to account for sort of that capture.
Yeah, that works. Okay. Thank you.
Other comments on this? Julie, you're a gardener.
Oh, but this is way over my head. I'm just good with my little flowers. But Becky.
Could you raise the microphone up towards, yeah, that's
Oh,
good.
Becky Elder was just commenting to me that she thought it would be helpful to have trees on the El Paso Boulevard edging there so that there's not a view of the, structures that are on the other side of that street. Something that would, and I don't know, I don't recall from the packet whether we're going to be planting trees that will provide some visual cover. And then the other question is, what if any irrigation system or drip system are we utilizing, at least for the first year or so of the new trees, so that they don't die? Because inevitably we plant trees and a huge percentage of them seem to die because of lack of attention. So those are my two questions.
Okay, thank you. Aaron, could you note those questions? I don't know that those are central to stormwater, but we could come back to them. Would that be appropriate?
Sorry.
Okay, because
I
we're
jumped
right now,
around.
we're trying to solve the stormwater, what the future stormwater looks like. So your two questions,
Okay.
the trees, I guess for visual screening along El Paso Boulevard, and then the irrigation provisions, at least for the first year. So those are a couple questions. Well,
Thank
okay,
you. I've made note.
great, thanks. Okay. So other comments relative to stormwater? Are we all pretty happy with what's presented in the slide here and the discussion so far? Very happy. Okay. Anybody want to take this farther, or can we move on? Michelle, you okay? You good? Okay. Everybody's good. Okay. So we like slide 13 of 24 on phase one. So does that, can we cross that one off? Aaron, is that okay?
Sorry. Yes, thank you.
Okay, well, we want to, I mean, it's sometimes easier to eat the elephant one bite at a time, so we'll take things here one at a time. Then I think the parking lot was the second strategy item for this.
Yes, that's correct. Slide 16.
Okay, and so okay, you're proposing here we would have 96 total stalls as opposed to 140 now? But that, does that 140, that includes the west side, does it, west of the pavilion?
Yeah, so the 140 existing is for this property as a whole. So it does include the area that is proposed as plaza. So 96 would be in this next phase, with 6 of the 96 being ADA parking spots. I would like to note, we don't have to have 6 ADA parking spots. We could have fewer ADA parking spots if that was the preference. I think 2 was the required, sorry, 4 would be required by code, so we could reduce that by 2 if that was the preference of council. But generally, this layout with this orientation is what we're looking for confirmation on tonight.
Okay, thank you. Is there like an industrial standard as to how many, what percentage of the number of parking slots should be allocated for ADA? And if there is, where are we at if we have, say, 6 versus 11?
Yes, there are code standard requirements. So for the proposed design of 96 spaces, we would be required to provide 4. So if we wanted to remove 2, we could, but in the current scenario, which I think you're asking about, Mayor, there are more ADA stalls currently on site than what are required.
Okay, so the federal government would be happy with us, and ADA, people with ADA needs, we'd be accommodating them appropriately. Okay. Other questions from council, please? Well, I guess the similar question, council, do we like what we see on slide 16 to 24? It's a proposal for, 6 ADA slots, 96 stalls, and the electrical charging units will be on the other side. Is that correct?
That's correct. The electrical charging units were installed as part of a previous grant, and so they must remain in place. So we're maintaining them in their existing location and improving the parking adjacent to them by having this paved, having a sidewalk for them to walk on, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. Well, if certainly we can discuss this more if council wants to, but if we're happy with what we see, I'll simply ask council if, okay, Julie?
I just have a random question. Is there going to be a designated place for motorcycles so that they're not taking up a whole parking spot?
Good question.
That's a great question. There are no dedicated motorcycle parking spaces allocated at this time. If that's a direction that city council would like us to explore, we can certainly explore that.
And then I really don't know about motorcycle parking, but it looks like where we do have it, it's a much smaller space than what you would have for a car. Do we get motorcycles that are parking in Hiawatha?
I've never
John?
seen a motorcycle down there.
Oh, okay, that's
The
my
whole time
question.
I've
And
gone through there.
you would know because
Yeah.
you're there all the time. Okay.
That's definitely something we can work with John Crawford on, is how many motorcycles are we seeing in that space on average, and potentially take one of those parking spaces.
It sounds like the average is 0, so I'm good.
Well, I think now's a good time to ask the question though. So yeah, maybe if you could get with Mr. Crawford and think about that, but I don't know if that needs to slow us down any. Council, are we good with this slide and what's proposed by it? Okay. Okay, so Aaron, direction is make it look like slide 16 and check into the motorcycle question. Okay. Let's see, I think next we have the mobility issue. Let's find a slide that's representative of that. Slide 18, I think, is that? Okay,
Is the one on the screen what council wants on the board right now?
yeah, so council again, so we've chose bike lockers, bike racks, handicapped accessible spaces. We got the EV charging over on the west side. Anybody have thoughts on Michelle?
I should probably ask this when Pike Ride was here, but are we looking at adding Pike Ride?
There is a dedicated area for bikes there. Aaron, maybe you could address that.
That's correct. So there's dedicated area for bikes. When we're looking at this full vision, with phase two is when the current Pike Ride location would have to change. So that is something we could incorporate into phase one if that's the direction of council. But we've also, I think, had just some preliminary internal conversations about would the Pike Ride be more visible at the Chase Bank or the Duck Stop property, with the proximity to the Mountain Metro stops there. So it's something that could be incorporated here if that was the direction, but also there are options for where it can go.
Okay, thank you.
I guess just personally, I would favor having the bikes at the Duck Stop. Again, can connect with the Mountain Metro, and it seems to me like that's a good functional way to, the bike transit people would have that area, and then the car transportation people would be more focused down in the other lot here, and everybody can get to the bathroom one way or the other. So if that would be my druthers, but would you be okay with that, Michelle? Okay, and
Well,
Julie?
and my thought is too, once we are up and running and we have all of the information available in the pavilion or wherever it is to inform people, then I'm sure we'll have information that says go up to the Chase Bank if you want to rent a bike from Pike Ride. And so there'll be notice to people so that they know where the heck to go if they don't have their own bike. And I also just am really pleased that we're seeing bike lockers included, because just the other day a Manitou resident had his bike stolen, his electric bike stolen outside of, I think it was the Walgreens at Uinta or something, but I'm sensitive to the fact that people don't want to spend a lot of money on a bike and then just get some little lock and hope for the best. So I was pleased to see that.
Okay, thank you. Other comments relative to the strategy 3 on mobility? If we're good, we'll ask them to, we'll ask Erin and her crew to give us something like slide 18. That sound okay? Slide 18. Okay. Let's see, then we have art and community. Maybe slide 20. Does that seem okay? Council, what are your thoughts on art and community? Natalie, you're the arts person, so I'm gonna pick on you. Let's start
Again,
off.
Crane is doing great work all throughout town, and I appreciate their input. And if they think it's great, I think it's great.
Thank you. And Natalie, how long does the match tax good for now? Without, I mean,
Yeah, 15, so about
10 years,
11, 10, 11.
9, 10 years. Okay, so we could figure we've got a funding source for art potentially for
Don't worry, John, we're going to
nine-
renew it. We'll
Well,
renew it.
no, I think we will. I think we will. But what I'm thinking is, could we count on some of that to help take the pressure off of, say, the general fund or whatever, because
I think that's the intent.
that's the intent?
I think so.
Well, I like that. Okay, so I guess one of my thoughts would be take a somewhat more Spartan approach on this while we get things done, roughing areas in for eventual art. And Aaron, you'd spoken to that, I think, particularly with phase 2 about not putting the foundations in, but planting the trees so that it all came together in time. So I think, continuing a phased approach, that may be several years down the road before we can bring the art in. But I guess that's where I would cut costs personally. But I'd like to hear from other council members. Julie?
And to Judith's point, I would love us to inform Match when the time comes that we are sensitive to, or we would really prefer to see Indigenous art projects as a preferential treatment in this particular location, so that they're aware of that as a priority for us. I realize that's not going to happen right away, but I'd love to see that incorporated to the Match decision-making process.
Okay, great. And just as a brief commercial opportunity here. I will say that with the coming Indigenous Peoples Day, I think a lot of the focus is going to be to bring Indian artists in. Some will be doing plein air painting over that weekend, and others will be showing their, their work. Some are do beadwork, pottery, and so forth. So that would be the plan. Still being formed up, but that would be this October. So great, Nancy, please.
Yeah, and I know that this has been relayed to you guys, but I would just prefer that the crane be brought into the, or just told that we are, we want to ensure that Indigenous have representation. I don't know that it should be necessarily given priority. We made Higginbotham Flats. It seems like a priority up there for Indigenous people. So I just would like to see that the Indigenous have input into Crane's overall plan, but not necessarily that we are saying that they have to do Indigenous art overall. If that makes sense, sorry.
Okay. Well, council, then looking at slide 20 of 24, are we reasonably happy with what's being proposed here? Okay, I see heads nodding. So slide 20 of 24. If you'd follow that, and again, the addendum to the Crane, you can work with Crane and the Indigenous folks. Let's see, and I think then we got 4 things, but we had the bathroom kind of as a separate issue. So now that went from like 5 fixtures for men and women down to 3. So maybe that's worth a little bit of discussion. Council, do you have thoughts? Denise, you lean forward there. Did you have?
I was just going to say, this is, we did this to save some cost and also to save staffing time. If we have 5 and 5, that's 10 restrooms, which then adds a lot of staffing time and cleaning and taking care of it. So this is more than just saving on the bathroom. It's also saving staffing and everything that's required.
I understand. And being a guy, I don't stand in line very often. So this would be an opportunity for the ladies to express their frustration and do something about it. From an Arctic standpoint, do you have guidelines as to, I mean, a number of people like you'd have in a theater and you'd need so many restrooms? Or I don't mean to put you on the spot, but.
That's a great question. This was the amount of restrooms provided was primarily driven from the concept design, which you reviewed in December. There are no requirements. So there are no code requirements for just a parking use that would drive the restrooms. If we look ahead to phase 2, so as we start to move into the phase 2 requirements, it would depend on the amount of occupants in the pavilion, the amount of visitors in an event that would then drive the number of restrooms. So if we're looking at across the way, I would need to run those calculations on the reduced restroom count. I can't say with 100% certainty, but I am relatively sure we would be compliant with anticipated uses under the pavilion.
Okay, thank you. And I'm thinking that the men's restroom in Soda Springs Park is 3 fixtures. And of course, the park is heavily populated with people for certain events and that kind of thing. So maybe 3 and 3 is enough. And you've got the 2 family restrooms. Michelle, your thoughts?
I'm good with 3 and 3 because the, whoever rents the space, they can purchase porta potties to rent. When we have our big events, that's what those people are doing, like Pikes Peak Ascent Marathon's coming up next month, and they're bringing in, 20 porta potties.
Okay, council, are we good with what's proposed, 3 and 3 and 2 family, gender neutral restrooms?
Oh, and can I jump in?
Sure, yeah.
I just wanted to say, I think it's really smart to have benches by the bathroom. So the men can wait for the women. And I'm really happy to see that there are 2 extra stalls for families or whomever is more comfortable using those rather than the men or the women. So I'm really happy with the proposal. I'm assuming this is a wood structure?
Correct. This is a wood frame structure.
Thank you.
Okay, so 3, 3, and 2. Maybe work some benches for waiting nearby. Are we good with that?
That sounds great. I also wanted to just add one other programming element that has been included on the family restrooms is adult changing tables. That's not currently an amenity we have, I believe, at any of our restrooms in town. So this is, I think, a step towards a lot more inclusivity here, especially when we think about some of the adjacent play spaces in Memorial Park, that families will be included in all aspects of that experience. So just wanted to share that. I forgot to mention it during the presentation.
Okay, great, good. Okay, so I think we've covered phase 1. We talked 4, actually 5 by the time we worked the bathrooms in on their own. So now phase 2, and we have no money. It sounds like we have no money to do phase 2. So council, do we want to hope that they can sharpen their pencils and we have a little left over to do something with phase 2? And I guess one of my questions is if we leave the pavilion buttoned up, just kind of keep it weather tight so it doesn't decay, how much would we save? And that maybe isn't a question where we can get a quick answer tonight, but
And if I'm understanding the question, I think that has been the plan for phase 1 is that phase 2 as a pavilion would stay buttoned up until such time as there is funding for phase 2. I think relative to construction phasing of phase 1, we would anticipate using that parking lot future plaza space as a staging area, so that we're storing, any sort of materials that are needing to be stored are within our site and we're not having to take up any other spaces with that. But in terms of what that temporary condition looks like in phase 2, that's something we can definitely explore as a temporary condition until funding is available for the full phase 2 approach, if I'm answering your question.
yeah, I think it does. And again, there's a lot of fuzziness to this just because we're throwing so many things around and we've seen costs, it's inflation and so forth. It's such a challenge. But I guess what I was thinking is, could we squeeze and it looks like now that maybe we just tell ourselves to do phase 1 and be happy with that and then look at phase 2 at some later point. But I was thinking, can we get a little bit farther if we came up with some more money? And that's probably not a safe thing to do. Denise, do you have a thought?
I just want to say with today's world, I don't think we're going to come in with any extra money. I think we're going to be struggling to hit this depending on tariffs and everything that happens. So we're going to be sharpening our pencil, I think, every step of the way, trying to make sure that we are able to do this depending on cost. And we're seeing costs just from month to month go up, unfortunately. That's one of the reasons why we're not starting this project in November, which we talked about at one point, because then we have to do 2 mobilization. So it saves us a lot of money to wait, even though we wanted to get it going so we could get started and try to get it done a little bit earlier. It just cost us additional money. So we're sharpening the pencil on everything we have, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. That's a good point.
And
Michelle,
I-
please.
Sorry,
Okay.
I did want to address Councilor Wolf's questions on phase 1, if I may, before we get down to phase 2,
Yeah,
or
let's-
would you prefer me to wait?
Actually, well, Michelle, you had your hand. Okay. So yeah, okay. Aaron, why don't you go ahead and respond to Julie's questions and then Michelle will have you.
So with the proposed design for trees at the north, we are maintaining 2 of the 4 in place, and then the other 2 will be transplanted either elsewhere on the site or elsewhere in that northern buffer. So there are trees there, and we'll have a few more added, but they are smaller trees because we're planting them young and then they'll get bigger, hopefully. And then irrigation, we are anticipating, so that northern edge is not currently irrigated. We'd anticipate adding irrigation there, and that all proposed planting areas would have irrigation to help us through that establishment period. And then once we're done with that establishment period, the frequency of that watering can decrease, but that amenity is there for us as needed.
So that's already priced in.
That's correct. That's priced
Great.
in.
Thank you.
Julie, you got your questions answered? Okay, good, good. All right, Michelle, you had your hand raised?
Not to kick, the mayor likes to say kicking the can down the road. But I believe that phase 2 can wait, due to a new council that will be starting January 6th and the budget and the ballot. So I'm fine with moving phase 2 to be discussed next year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Those are good points. So would council in general be content with just suspending, just hold our expectations on phase 2 and let's get phase 1 done? Is that okay? Nancy?
Does Aaron need it for the master plan?
I do. And that would be for the major development plan and for the MS4 permit to show that we have an approach that is meeting all of those standards. That is not to say that if, the future council decided to make a change or a tweak, that they couldn't do that. They definitely could. We would just have to bring that application back as a revised development plan. And it would still need to show in that revised design that we're meeting those performance requirements for the MS4 permit and the landscape standards. So if we're comfortable moving forward with it as tonight, I don't think we're and I can confirm this with my design team, that we're hamstringed from making changes if the future council decided to do so, making programming changes, et cetera. But we'd still be obligated to meet our city code requirements as we get those approvals to follow our processes. If
Okay.
that was clear as mud.
Okay, well, I think it sounds like it's doable. Yeah, I mean, is that, so Nancy?
You're
is
just
that-
looking for us to say we're okay with the 3 strategies for phase 2, because if we ever in our lives or anybody's life has enough money to do phase 2, in all likelihood, it can be tweaked at that point in time.
Correct.
But at this point, you need it to go for further approval to say that we are on board with the strategies if you'd laid them out for phase 2, correct? Thanks. So
That's
I'm fine
correct.
with that. Thank you.
Okay, good. Judith?
I need more clarity because two problems that I have with phase 2. Number one, and you laid this out on a slide, I can't remember which one, but there was not a lot of design change on phase 1 from what we, went through a community engagement process with. But there was quite a bit of a design evolution on phase 2. And I don't feel comfortable with that not going to another community engagement meeting. And I also have a tremendous amount of heartburn about this tree plan. And I'm a hard no on if that's has to be part of, any of this strategy that we're moving forward. I'm not okay with it at this point. I think we need to have further conversations about that. A proposed cost was not included in the packet for all these trees. By my calculations, we were looking at, I added up all the inches of trees to come out to between 234 and 280 inches of trees, anywhere between 40 and 76 trees, depending on if you add or the stems that were in there. So I'm not comfortable with, if that's part of the strategy, we need to go back to the drawing table on that and have more input and discussion on that. So tell me how that would work.
Yes, I'm happy to answer questions on that. So there were kind of 3 tiers of approaches. That was a recommendation by Tall Timbers, and it's a recommendation again. So this is all to our discretion. The first was pruning the tree canopies to enhance their structure. The second was thinning. As we have some crowding in that understory, it does restrict that mature canopy growth in a way that is, in their professional recommendation, not helpful for the overall health of that tree canopy. And then the third was identifying trees that had to be removed, or I'll say had it in air quote or in quotes, that they recommended being removed because of construction disturbance. And that's where we get into some of the existing conditions of paving being so close to the edge of these trees. So we've paved in the past in the critical root zone. So the concern with the arborist at that time, and this is something, again, we can request additional information from him on, was that even just in the demo of that existing asphalt, we would be disturbing those trees in a very meaningful way. The ones that he's recommending on the east side of the property are those that have a lean over the parking area. Those on the south side in phase 2 are again those multi-stemmed trees that are located there, and ones that he doesn't see as having the mature sort of branching pattern in their future as possible with sort of that condensed planting. The thinning on the east side, if that's not the direction of council to take it this time, it's not essential for the phasing. It's just a recommendation for the overall canopy health on the east side as well as hazard mitigation along that edge. So, but if that's not the direction of council, we don't have to do it. I wanted to just include that full report and all that he's recommending as part of his analysis.
I'm not opposed to fire mitigation and
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to thinning where that needs, but I walked that site and it just reminded me of Creek Walk Phase 3. And when I looked at the contract for Creek Walk Phase 3, 18 trees were slated to come out from between the swimming pool and Mayfair. And at $1,000 a pop. Right? And so I requested to walk the site. I want to take a look at these trees. And to me, I'm sorry, I'm gonna, when the new council comes in, I'm gonna request that that's a requirement. That when we have, a development of the scale where we're looking at massive tree removal, one of the trees slated for potential removal is 45 inches at chest height. It is an antiquated, vintage old growth tree that should be pruned but not cut. So once we walk that phase 3, that Creek Walk Phase 3, no trees needed to come out. And I said, well, how does that happen? How does that happen? Well, the contractor just shoots a laser and anything in his way gets a red mark. So I'm kind of, I'm gun shy with this because when I walked the property today and I looked at all the photos, it took me, several hours out there. I think we need more eyes and more input on the community level before we commit to that. Because that's a lot of tree canopy. We're talking about a lot. If the tree's dead, that's fine. If it's leaning over a car, that's fine. But there are a number of trees that are slated, and I'm talking about in the packet, all of these trees from pages 9 through 12. That's where I got all this information in the packet if you want to look at it. That's way too much massive change over there. I'm just not comfortable with it right now. I want to walk the site with community experts before we make major changes.
Thank you for that feedback. I did have maybe a clarifying question. The 45 inches at diameter at breast height, that tree, I believe the one that is the one we did the risk assessment on. Is that correct?
Judith, could you turn your microphone on, please?
Leaning over the building, I went over there and it definitely needs to be pruned. It needs to be pruned away from the building, but that tree shouldn't even be considered to be removed.
Yes, and I do want to address that. We had a risk assessment done on that tree because of its lean and its size. And so we wanted to make sure we were looking at this from all angles and giving city council as much information as possible. In that risk assessment, I think the decision is squarely in city council's court in terms of what they want to do. The qualifiers that the assessment made was that they couldn't see the root health just because of the water level at that time. So his sort of first tier approach would be pruning the dead wood out of that tree so that we're reducing that load if it was ever to fall, but that there was the risk of it falling was moderate at this time. And so unless we saw a severely rotted root structure, we would not recommend removing that tree. So I'm sorry for any confusion on that. That was also supported by PARAB, that if there was ever a direction to remove that tree, that they requested additional information regarding the health of the root structure, and we would definitely get a second opinion as well. So that one we're not currently showing as a removal, and I apologize if the documents didn't say that as clearly, but I wanted to make everyone just aware that was a tree that had been analyzed.
I guess in order to not hold up any more phase 2, so we're talking about the 3 strategies Do we need to even talk about the trees tonight as part of that strategy? Is that required, or can we table that and come back to that and have a more robust, informed conversation about that and have several council people walk the site and take a look at those trees? If you're asking us to make an educated, decision about that, we should have boots on the ground about it,
No, I don't think we're requesting a formal decision on that this evening.
Okay.
I think this inventory was really our first step in really understanding where did we see risks and making sure that we're reducing the risk where possible and sharing the risk where the risk cannot be mitigated for.
So what I hear you saying is we can go through the strategies and table the tree discussion altogether for another, when phase 2 comes back.
Yes, I think the one caveat I want to add to that is the southern portion of phase 2 where we're terracing down to the creek. The other sort of multi-stem trees that are there would have to be removed for that terracing to occur. But if that was to be a direction that was changed in the future, that's something that could have a simpler approach or a lighter approach, but we just lose that programming.
And that's specifically the kind of thing I want the community to be involved in, because in walking the site today, that's a lot of tree canopy, right? And I want the community to rubber stamp this. I don't want to rubber stamp it for the community. I wanted the community to say, we love this plan. We like it. We're okay with the trees coming out, and then I'm okay with it. But I don't want to sit here and go, I'm totally fine with all these trees coming out, and have the community be aghast because once you remove all those trees, your direct line of sight is the Chase Bank and all the buildings across it from it. That is what you would see. So we have to be very careful when we design these things on what's it going to look like, and is this what the community wants? That's where I'm sitting on it. I'm not willing to have only 7 people weigh in on that decision. So
yeah, thank you for that feedback. And one just point of clarification, because this did come up with Parab as well, is that right now we're not anticipating disturbance on the south side of the creek. So any tree canopy there will be maintained in place as part of the phase 2. Just again, that was just something that came up at Parab, so I wanted to share that here as well.
Okay, Julie, please.
Yeah, I appreciate the direction that this is going in. I was going to suggest a similar proposal where we approve phase 2 so that the master development plan and all of that can go forward. But we also make a record that we will evaluate the tree removal, excuse me, before phase 2 begins. And what I'm hearing is that the tiered approach would still have to be approved now so that they can get that construction going, but that we don't actually vote on specific trees to be removed or not removed until the time comes. Is that correct?
That's correct. I do want to share some additional information that was in the packet in December, but I didn't highlight here, is we'd had the ecological characterization study done for the site. And the reason that number is not pulled out separately at this time is we anticipate any tree removal based on our ecological characterization recommendation would need to happen this fall between October and December to be in compliance with the recommendations of that report. So that would be the one thing, they're wanting to keep that disturbance out of sort of those nesting periods so that it's not disrupting any of our native species. So that's just one thing to add some context of why there's not a number in there. That is something, if it is council's direction, that we can proceed with getting estimates on that, wherein we would request them to break it out into a pruning estimate for a line item of that full scope, a thinning estimate, and then a tree removal estimate so that it can be evaluated that way. And then we can get multiple bids on that and bring it back. Because we would anticipate that happening outside of the main contract, just from a sequencing standpoint.
But to clarify, even in your terrace design, not all of those trees would have to come out. Some of them could stay. I mean, I'm personally would have to have somebody walk the site, because being there in person and looking at it, and there is a possibility that some of those trees could stay. So I guess I'm not willing to rubber stamp this if it means saying yes to a terraced plan with us knowing that trees are going to have to come out, but then leaving it to a new council to say, but you could change your mind and not, and then change your mind. That to me does not get us where we need to go. In other words, I don't want to, if you're saying that in order to approve the strategies for this phase, and I'm not, I don't have a dog in this fight as far as the design. I'm just talking about the trees at this point. So am I hearing very clearly that if we approve the terraced design, the pervious surface with the creek walk, being very exposed, then basically we are in effect kind of approving that trees will have to come out. I mean, I just want to be very transparent, and I just want to make sure that we are apples and apples here.
I think that's something that I don't have the expertise to, that sort of middle road of saying, could we keep these trees and the terracing? That's something I'm more than happy to discuss with the arborist. I know different trees have different tolerances for disturbance, and look at how maybe we could preserve some of those trees on the north side of the creek. If that's the request.
I think I'm more interested in making sure that if we approve the strategies and if you say we're approving the terraced approach, but then we can table the tree removal issue, to me, that doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? In other words, if we're approving the strategy for the terraced approach, then we basically are approving tree removal. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive.
Excuse me, Aaron. I believe Parab did a pretty thorough investigation of the trees. I mean, my understanding is when they checked each tree out and provided information back, and I think my understanding is they were pretty consistent with what with Tall Timbers provided. And Tall Timbers did, I mean, we've got a spreadsheet there with 41 or 42 trees and a disposition recommendation for each tree. The fire department also endorsed, my understanding is they endorsed the Tall Timbers findings. So I think a lot of this work has been done, Judith, that we've got, we've evaluated trees, or in some cases, these are just clusters of little Siberian elms that we're talking about. I'm sorry if you could respond to that.
Yes, that is correct. That is the information that we gathered prior to this hearing. I would, also like to say that if we do want to eliminate the terrace from it and just take a lighter handed approach along the creek, that is something we can absolutely, edit before coming back for entitlements if that's council's direction. So I'm fine with whatever approach, but if that's what's desired.
I just want to, if I may just comment, I thoroughly respect Parab. I mean, the great people on it, but there isn't one tree expert on Parab. There's not an arborist on Parab. There's not a tree committee on Parab. They are parks people. And while I really appreciate them looking at the overall plan, and I really appreciate the fire department, because mitigation does need to be done in that area, and there is thinning that needs to be happening, and there are dead trees there. But again, I guess what is frustrating to me is that council isn't invited. I haven't been invited. Hey, are there any council members that just want to walk, hoof this with Tall Timbers, and they can walk you and talk you through this? We don't get invited to the party, but we're supposed to make this decision after the fact. And while I like the plan overall, I think it's beautiful. I'm not opposed to the terraced approach. I don't feel comfortable. This is too much of a design change not to have one more community engagement on this phase. And because it's essentially mothballed, if there's something minimal that you need in order to get phase one started, which I'm still not sure why we need this phase two to get phase one started, since we're mothballing this indefinitely because we don't have money. Why we're even needing to go here. I mean, is this essential to getting phase one over the finish line? Can we just say, this is our plan, but we are putting it on hold because of funding issues?
The The plan that we have presented tonight meets the landscape standards and the MS4 permit, which is something that we need to see amongst other things when we look at this site as a whole. Frequently in different aspects of our code, there's a phrase of not allowing phasing to avoid providing requirements, and showing that you have that full vision. So to clarify why we need that tonight. However, there's also a clarification that says, if there are major changes to the plans as shown, then it would be brought back for review again. So it's not written in stone in that sense, but it is showing that there is a strategy to meeting the standards as shown. If it's direction of council for us to have another community engagement event on this, then I mean, we're fine with that and accommodating it. And that's something that could, change that design after entitlements so that we can get phase 1 moving. And then we would just bring it back as an amended major development plan.
Is
And
there a significant cost to that, to amending it and bring it back?
So the cost from like a staff perspective and going through entitlements, we don't pay entitlement fees to ourselves. I would have to discuss with the design team on that. I think what we would see is our current trajectory, and this is again something we can kind of discuss and send out information after. With our current trajectory, we were wanting, again, just from a funding standpoint, to bring construction documents for both, because we've heard from grant agencies and other forms of funding that having that level of detail is really shows our commitment to the process, makes us shovel ready, and makes our projects appealing. But if it's our direction to do more community engagement, et cetera, we maybe would have to pause the construction document phase for phase 2, because that's not an investment we'd want to make if we still thought that was going to change in a big way. And I can ask and give if there's any costs of that we might anticipate.
I think you answered my question, though. I think what I heard you say, and I just want to clarify, that we can approve this as a strategy to move the project forward. And the next council can vote to make significant changes and to the phase 2 part when that comes up again. And that is not a deal breaker for getting this over the finish line now.
Yes, I would say the one caveat that I would maybe make to that is that the next council couldn't come back and say this entire plaza needs to be paved with 90% impervious surface and 10% vegetated. That might be something that it present challenges for their meeting the MS4 requirements and things like that. So if that is the direction they wanted, then they'd have to show how that strategy still complied with our landscape standards and our MS4 standards, for example. If that, does that answer your question?
Okay, thank you. I believe Natalie was next and then Nancy.
I was just going to ask again if it impacted our ability to apply for grants and find funding if we didn't have an approved phase 2. And that's just, again, and you sort of addressed that to some degree. So that's all.
Okay, thank you, Nancy.
So Erin, do we need the construction documents to approve the strategies?
No. So something that's a little bit different than, I'll use the library as an example. We brought it forward at 50% construction documents for the library. In this case, we're bringing what's called 100% design development documents because they have the level of detail that we need to ensure code compliance, but aren't taking that to the sort of next level. That is where we're getting into like PPRBD requirements. And there's a cost associated with that.
So we don't have to do construction documents now for phase 2 since it's unlikely we'll be able to follow through with it anytime soon.
We don't have to. I think this would be something just with certain grants might like to see construction documents over design development. There's still a level of detail there. But when we talk about shovel ready, construction documents are shovel ready, whereas design development documents would need additional time to get there.
Because there's a significant cost to construction documents that if we're not going to move forward in the next several years, which I can't imagine we would, that I would certainly prefer not to have to do construction documents because I'm not optimistic about getting grants either. So just a consideration.
And that's something that I can follow up with this meeting of, what would still be remaining in the budget with construction documents? Is there anything from, how certain systems cross this line that are benefited?
Thank you. Michelle, did you have some?
Yes, thank you. I'm good with phase two, except for that part of what Judith was talking about with the terrace is like, there's going to be at least 7 trees that are recommended to be removed as I was looking at the site map.
I believe there's more like 21 trees recommended for removal. In that whole, and that includes the phase 1 section, but if you look at it was the tall timbers report, there's, roughly, I think the inventoried 41 or 42 trees and something like 21 are recommended for removal. And, well, yeah, around the park, a lot of it's, it's the south and the east side of the area mostly. There's 7 trees. Let's see, there's the 2 pine trees up in the northwest corner. There's about 5 along El Paso Boulevard, and then the rest are at the eastern edge of what's going to be phase 1, and then the south side. And the majority of those are Siberian elms. In some cases, they're just little clusters of small trees, small diameter trees.
But Mayor, may I make a
Yeah, no,
comment?
just a minute. You've talked for a bit here, Judith. So, it seems to me like it's an opportunity to clean out some inferior trees and ultimately put in some better quality trees. Siberian elms are, I know it's heresy in Manitou to downgrade any tree, but Siberian elms are weeds, and we could have some real variety and some real beauty. I think the library park is a good example of having some diversity with different species and so forth, so that I'm reasonably content with the recommendations from Tall Timbers. It's got the work that the para people did on it. It has their endorsement. And again, the fire department thought it would be good to thin some of that out. So that'd be my take on it. So Judith?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out one thing, and that is when I first counted this, I thought it was 24 to 26 trees too, because I was only looking at the recommendation in the column and counting up the removals. But if you go to the notes, there's several that where it says 4 elms, 3 elms, and then what, 4. So when you count all of them, even excluding the stems, you're looking at between 40 and 76 trees to be removed. So I just want to make that clear that while I agree, I had Tall Timbers come to my house and do $1,300 worth of work recently. And guess what? They looked at my house. I have this humongous, beautiful Siberian elm behind my garage, and it really needed to be trimmed. And you know what? They said, oh, this is a great tree. It's beautiful. And I was talking to a park ranger at the Garden of the Gods, and he said, we use that invasive word all the time. And he goes, you know what? If we took out every invasive species in the Garden of the Gods, it would be freaking naked. So I think we have to be very careful because Tall Timbers was happy to trim that tree. They didn't say, wow, this is a weed and it's got to come out. Because if it would have come out, it would have, it's got an amazing canopy and so many wildlife species live in that tree. So I think we have to be careful, but just be careful when you look at this to add up all of the actual numbers of trees that are slated to come out. That's not a very big of a geographic location. And again, I don't think it's fair for us to make that decision and not have the community weigh in. I think that's just really unfair.
Julie?
Well, there may be a difference of opinion among various council members here. My inclination is to approve this so that we are eligible to get grant money. And understanding that some of the trees that we would hope to discuss later for phase 2, that we could discuss that later, and that it's the phase 1 trees, if they have to come out under the current proposal, I think we need to determine whether there's a majority on that or not, because we could discuss this for 10 hours and it may not change anyone's mind. So my inclination personally is I want to approve this so that we can get the development plan approved and try to get some grant monies flowing here, and with the understanding that everything involving phase 2 is going to be subject to new council decisions.
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
I'm fine with that. I agree with Julie. Thank you.
Okay, so Julie, again, just to kind of restate, so we want to, your intent would be or to see if we're good with going ahead so we can do the paperwork on phase 2 and have ammunition to go out for grants.
Well, so yeah, so we can do the paperwork for phase 1 and phase 2, because what I'm hearing is that both of them need to be approved, at least phase 2 in concept, need to be approved in order to get the major development plan or whatever you call it approved. And so that also it's part and parcel of a grant proposal that we might be submitting. I would imagine if you're just submitting a grant proposal for a bathroom and a couple of parking spots, it may not be as appealing to the people who are giving out the money, as opposed to if we show the whole long-term plan, even if the money we get can be used for phase 1. So I propose that we go ahead and and approve this, and with the understanding, phase 1 and phase 2, for those reasons, and that with the understanding that before we get to phase 2, obviously there's going to be major discussion about it. And there could be some tweaking and changes, or particularly when it comes to the trees, and perhaps other things too, who knows? So I propose that we give the approval to these folks who are sitting here so that they can move forward.
Okay, I get, council okay with doing that and then tabling on the take the trees on another time? Okay, so Julie, you're a yes. Michelle, you're a yes. How about you, John? Okay. Okay,
I'm a no, but I know it'll pass, so
Okay.
I'll stick with my no.
and Nancy?
Yeah, I definitely, I mean, we were asked tonight to approve those 7 strategies. I think that I'm fine with all 7 of them, and I would like to move. I would just like to hear if you have to have the construction documents for phase 2, because I'd rather not do the construction documents if we don't need to. Thank you.
And I'd be okay with going forward with all that too. So I think council's looks like 6 of us are in favor of giving you the direction to go ahead and do the necessary paperwork. And let's see if we can get this going. And then I guess the trees will, if we sit the trees out tonight, if we table it, is that gonna, how much of a hardship does that present for you?
I think that that's fine for tonight. That's something we can bring back as part of the entitlements of what is the, I'll say minimum amount of trees once we've gone through the pavement depth, the disturbance for each of there were 7 individual trees identified for construction, and then the thinning strategy, we can sort of have those as 3 different requests instead of it being all wrapped up into one like it is in this inventory. I think that works for me. Yeah.
Okay. Well, council, do you want to do a field trip? We go down and walk through and check all the trees out? Anybody? We're okay with that?
Mayor, can I ask for one point of
Go ahead, ask
clarification?
one
And
question.
this was based on Nancy Fortune's comment. Did I hear you say you would let us know if construction drawings were required for phase 2, even though the majority of council has already approved it? I mean, will you let us know yay or nay, and how will you do that?
Yes, I will need to do some additional research into whether construction documents are required for sort of next steps after October. And I'll get back to you guys. I won't wait till October to get back to you. But I'll need to consult with the design team and not sure exactly. I want to make sure I've got a full answer. But we can, I think, distribute that via email or.
Sorry, John?
So tell me, what's the finished date in which in phase 1 would be done that you anticipate in terms of where we are? End of July?
That's what we're shooting for.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Any reason why we can't make it end of May?
Because of temperature dependent work. So we have, asphalt can only be poured at a certain temperature for the best, longevity of that, as well as the landscape areas, making sure that those are installed and installed sort of outside of that risk of snow so that they have the best chance of establishment. So that's what's driving sort of this overlap between the 2
Okay.
seasons.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Okay, and I would be happy with the tree report as it's presented, but it sounds like council's intent is we'd like to do a a field trip and walk through and check out the trees. So if you could organize that, we'll have to find a time we can do that, but I don't think that'll hold you up. Is that? what you're
No,
saying? Okay.
that's something I can look into.
Okay. So earlier tonight, you had a slide there with a timeline for all this. My thinking is that what you have tonight is going to let you work to that timeline. Does that
That's-
seem reasonable?
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay, great. Council, we have anything else on this tonight? Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. All right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, great. Council, that was our last item, that is our last discussion item. So we can discuss any council correspondence you've received. Anybody have anything? Okay, does the city administrator have anything?
Just want to mention that the water meter change out program open house is this Thursday. So if you're interested, we'd love to have you come and learn about the program.
And what time is it? 6 o'clock?
6 to 8, yes.
6 to 8 here. Okay, great. Thank you. With that, we are adjourned.